This episode of The Rookie Hunter is sponsored by North Arm Knives. North Arm Knives are handcrafted and sold directly through a father and son team right here in British Columbia. Choose from a selection of outdoor knives, kitchen knives, and the brand new folding knife from northarmknives.com. They ship internationally and guarantee all their work. Callie and I use their products and give them our stamp of approval. Go to northarmknives.com. Hey guys, welcome to episode 45 of Rookie Hunter. This is a fun episode we're doing. We're calling this a SWAPCAST, and we're doing this with our friend Adam Janke from Beyond the Kill, another awesome hunting podcast that I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of. This is going to be available through us and through his podcast. We hope we get to introduce more folks to one another's podcast, and hope you guys enjoy this. This conversation was a lot of fun, and we're jumping into a very difficult topic here, which is the ban on trophy grizzly bear hunting in British Columbia. So not a subject that you can get into without doing a lot of research, and there's still more news to come out. So we're doing our best in this episode to sort of share our angle and how we feel about this as hunters, and trying to, give a perspective that maybe non-hunters can look in on it and hopefully get some insights onto why this might not be the best decision that was made. So hope you guys enjoy this one. Feel free to send in your feedback. I know anytime we do a controversial subject like this, people definitely have things to say. So please be open to our comments here, and if you have any, please send them in to us. Our email address is therookieHunterPodcast@gmail.com. You can also contact us through the website, which is therookieHunter.com. And as always, on the website, you can find all of our social media links and all that kind of stuff. So head over to the website. Again, if you guys want to help us out, there's a new way to do it. T-shirts are now available through the website. We've got a few different options for pre-order. We've got a basic cotton tee, which is a little bit cheaper, and we've got a really beautiful bamboo shirt available as well, in a few different styles and colors. So that's the new way to support the show, and I think the shirt's pretty badass, and I'm stoked to have one for myself. Head over to the website, click on the store tab if you're interested in pre-ordering a shirt, and we're going to get them out as fast as we possibly can. One more thing is I always ask is head over to iTunes and leave us a rating or review. That just makes us more visible to other iTunes users, and we're doing well in the Canada store, the Canadian iTunes store, but we need more help down south in the US. So if you're an American listener, please go to the store, leave us a rating or review, and let your American friends know that we exist. We want to reach more of you guys. We love doing this, and the more ears, the better. Let's get into this conversation. I had a lot of fun, as did Kelly. Sit back, relax, crack a cold beer, and enjoy the SWAPcast with Rookie Hunter and Beyond the Kill. This is round 2 of the SWAPcast between Rookie Hunter and Beyond the Kill. We tried to do this, what was it, last week? And I think we got a good 40 minutes into recording. And first time this has ever happened. I knew it was going to happen one day, but the computer totally shit the bed, and we lost all of the audio. So now I'm sitting behind a wall of computers right now. I got two computers running, making sure that we're capturing both. This laptop's, I don't know, about 5 years old, I guess, which isn't that old, but maybe it overheated. I have no idea what happened, but we're safe. Unless the power goes out, then we're screwed.
Yeah, then we know we're not meant to have this conversation.
Exactly. Right? Yeah.
It was 40 minutes of pure gold too. It was too bad.
It was, but it lost in space now.
You look like the world. Well, one of two things: either a DJ or Kelowna's best hacker right now. I'm not sure which.
A mix in between the two.
Yeah, somewhere in between the two.
Yeah. So we've got the usual Rookie Hunter lineup, which is Kelly and I.
Yeah. Hey.
And Adam Janke.
Howdy.
Beyond the Kill. And Chris Barker is back.
Thanks for having me again, guys.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure
of course.
To be here.
Happy to have you. So what's new? What's exciting? Anything big happened since the last time we met here a few days ago?
Nothing too big on my part, I don't think. We've just been busy trying to do sheep stuff and moving forward. Like I said, when we touched on last time, it's just the Jurassic Classic. We just finished fishing for sturgeon. I think you started that off, Kelly, with your salmon trip. But
explain that, because that's kind of a cool thing you guys got going on. I'm not sure if a lot of guys know about it. Kelly and I didn't know until you brought it up on the last episode we did with you.
Yeah, so a bit more information actually since our money thing. So Jurassic Classic is a conservation partnership between Great River Adventures and Wild Sheep Society BC, BCWF, Guide Outfitters, and Wild Sheep Foundation. And basically, it's a sturgeon fishing tournament to raise money for sheep conservation in the province. So as you kind of try and wrap your hand around a dinosaur saving North American sheep, once you get your head around the concept, it's a pretty cool idea because there's obviously sturgeon conservation and sheep conservation. And I think that's how the idea kind of melded out. Dean Work from Great River, it was his vision to put this together, and DU's been doing it, and he brought it to BCWF and wanted to do it for sheep. And yeah, what a unbelievable event. I got to partake in the fishing component of it, which was really cool. I was on a vessel with Gray Thornton from Wild Sheep Foundation, our CEO, Cam Foss, a bow hunter fisherman, and a really good friend has Steve Arnett, and we also got to fish with Dean, the owner of Great River. So
Very cool.
very, just an unbelievable day. But we, after all the numbers had settled and the auction and everything was paid off, I think we were in the neighborhood of $30,000.
Wow.
Nice. Over a weekend for sheep conservation.
Wow, very nice.
Success.
So money going to north for thin horns, money going south for big horns, probably to our burns in the Okanagan.
Right.
So
Awesome.
nothing's finalized yet, but those are some easy numbers. But yeah,
Good.
30 teams of 2 competing. Biggest fish, no weight, just longest fish. I think the biggest fish was 8'9", something like that.
So how do guys get involved in that for next year?
So fortunately for the organizers, they're pretty well sold out. Unfortunately for anybody that wants to buy a team, you have to either go to Wild Sheep Foundation Convention. They're going to sell 2 down there, one on a live auction, and then one at Life Members Breakfast. Wild Sheep Society BC, we'll have one at our convention, our Southern Convention, and we'll have one at our Northern Convention. BCWF will be raffle one off, and then various chapter affiliates throughout the state. So, but basically, after the event was done, they sold 10 teams that night. So
Yeah, that's
just
awesome.
the interest and people buying into the conservation aspect of things.
For sure.
Yeah, but like I say, just a great weekend. If you haven't never been sturgeon fishing, I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we have sturgeon in the Columbia River, which we grew up around. You especially, your backyard.
Yeah,
backed up onto it. But
my dad was pretty passionate about sturgeon fishing. We talked about this a bit last time, but that's part of the podcast that's lost forever. Yeah, pretty cool experience, and they've stopped it on the Columbia River. As far as I know, it hasn't continued. It's been a long time, but yeah, he loved it. It's like pulling something prehistoric out of the river is pretty cool. So
yeah, we go every Christmas when I go back to trail. Everybody gets together and we go down fishing by the river and we bottom fish. So we just throw a bunch of rods out and put bells on them and start a campfire. And in about 2 minutes, the bells usually just start going off, and there's pretty big trout in there.
Oh, okay.
So we're reeling in rainbow trout, and then out of nowhere, one day you might see a big tail splash or something. And that's the day you're not getting any bites. And as soon as you see the sturgeon, it's like, well, that's why there's no fish in this eddy today, right? So,
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to see.
yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things I find so, I guess, on the one hand, fascinating, but just awesome about an event like the Jurassic Classic is like the triple win, right? It's benefiting sturgeon, it's benefiting sheep, and it's benefiting, the local economy in a lot of ways, right? I mean, there's a lot of people coming in from well out of town, well out of the province for goodness sakes, to come in and take part in this, right? And it's just, I mean, you were talking about this in the audio we lost about the conservation focus, the management focus that the people at Great River have around the sturgeon resource, right?
Yeah.
And it's just such an interesting, sort of story around how, the fishing is benefiting the sturgeon, but the fishing is also benefiting the sheep. And I mean, it's just a beautiful example of what, outdoors men and women as conservationists do, right? Well, and this isn't it's a unique story in its in what it is, right? But that's not a unique story, across North America as far as other, clubs and groups and events, right? That are achieving the exact same thing, right?
Yeah, it's just like I say, you touched on it, Adam. It's bringing like-minded people together for a cause that they believe in, where we can actually do something positive. You're going to leave feeling good. It's not. We touched on this the last time about you sign a petition and you think you're doing your part for whatever it is, and you think you're contributing that way, but really, it's just the easy way out. You're not getting your hands dirty. You're not getting in there to find out, you were touching on it earlier, Kelly, about finding out the roots of information from your conversation today with people at work.
Yep.
Is digging down into the issue and then getting down and how people engage into that. And that's our battle, right? That's how do we get those people to engage in that conversation and find out what it is, whether it's an event like that or what you were talking about at work today, Kelly, or
well, and based on what you started to say earlier, Kelly, and then we cut it short to save for the actual recording. I think I just want to make a quick point, and I want you to get into that because it sounded phenomenal. But on the topic of engagement, Chris, I've been thinking about all this a ton. I think about all this a ton most of the time, but especially since the news around the Grizzly ban came down. And it'll be before it will have gone to air before we put this to air, but I'll have Shane Mahoney back on again, and he really, how do I put it? I guess kind of woke me up to our half-assed efforts at engagement.
Yeah,
with and reaching across the aisle, as he put it, and he puts it in such a, as typical for Shane Mahoney, articulate and convincing way, right? And I was when the news came down, I was so quick to kind of lash out and react in a knee-jerk fashion, and for better or for worse, it was the way I did at the time. But as usual, with a bit of time thinking about it, talking to people about it, getting other perspectives on it, I realized that we have to look inwardly first, right? And how we engage with people. And so, Kelly, the opportunity you had to engage at work today is just a perfect example of the kind of efforts we all have to start making.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of it is having that knowledge of the science or the facts, which is hard because depending on where you're getting that information, some of those places you're getting those information from have incentives for their own reasons, right? So that's part of the challenge, is figuring out what are the facts. So I guess today what happened was, just the topic of the podcast came up, and I just started talking about hunting in general, and we're a day away from bow season and all this stuff. And I work with a bunch of folks that don't hunt in my department. Most of them are female. And one of them's from Thailand, so he doesn't have a lot of experience hunting. I don't know if there is a lot of hunting over there, but either way. So I just started talking about the grizzly bear ban, and everybody's ears kind of perked up a little bit, and I just started explaining some of the numbers. I think it's the Harris model. I think you touched on this in your podcast, Adam, but there's a percentage scientifically studied that shows how many grizzly bear you can remove from an area without impacting its population. I think it's like 6% or something like that.
And that's not all from hunting, right? Like 6% is the absolute max, including trains and accidents on the highways. And I think, and Chris, you may know this better. I would assume you would know this far better than me. Would that also include bears killed because of the human bear conflict as well?
Yeah,
it would. I think it is, Adam. I was just because I was looking at those reports too today or the other day that Lisa had sent me, and I was kind of going through, and it was more to do with the Kettle Valley stuff that the CBC pushed on. But I'll let you continue, Kelly, because I think that's more important. We can get into the facts.
Yeah, for sure. But I my understanding anyway is you start with your 6%. 2% is like unknown mortality, like grizzly bear has a heart attack, grizzly bear chokes on a fish, that kind of thing.
Male-to-male contact, right?
Male-to-male contact, right? Yeah. So, and then your 4% remaining.
Male to
Cubs.
kill.
Yeah,
Right.
that too. And then your 4% remaining, you have to account for the known kills, like your cars, trains, conflict kills, all that.
Yeah.
And whatever's left, based on like 5-year averages in that area, is what you can associate to hunting, which is resident and non-resident allocations. So if you have like 100 bears in an area, you can take out 6 of them scientifically. The ones associated to hunting might be 2 in that area.
Yeah.
One of them goes to a BC LEH and the other one goes to a guide or whatever. So I tried to explain like the actual impact of hunting versus the impact of just all of us humans taking up habitat and everything we do as a species, right? And then it kind of clicked for them that, oh, maybe hunting isn't, maybe we shouldn't be pointing the finger at hunting all the time for whatever. And then you kind of get into all the other stuff like grizzly bear age is actually increasing and their range is expanding. So I was trying to give them some facts and you could tell right away that they're engaged in the conversation. And I could tell that when the conversation started, they were probably the folks that were voting against the ban because you see the newspaper article, a nice picture of a bear. Should we hunt these? Well, for non-hunters, the automatic answer is no, right?
Yeah.
Like they think they're doing a good thing. But yeah, with a little education, I think you can start turning those heads and making them realize that it's a much more complex issue. And, making hunters leave remains like hide and head and all that isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. It might actually be more wasteful. So I don't know. I tried to touch on so many things today in that little conversation, and I think it was
which is
good.
great, which is phenomenal, right?
Yeah. So they took it well. It was a great conversation, and they all just said, "Wow, that's a complex issue." And I think that's part of the problem. Is I think people have to, when they see something on the news or whatever, just assume it's more complex than you think, and ask questions and see what the deal is. Don't just automatically have a knee-jerk reaction to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For non-BC residents who are listening to this right now, they don't necessarily have the backstory. Adam, you did a podcast a week and a half back here or whatever it was. You want to just tee us up and kind of let us know what's happening in BC here and why we're talking about grizzly bears today?
Yeah. So, if I miss anything or if I, misrepresent any of the information, because I haven't sort of 100% kept up to speed since the news dropped. But when the news dropped, grizzly bear hunting has been banned in certain management units in the province, mostly the mid to north coast of the province, and very specifically an area that's known as the Great Bear Rainforest. Very important ecosystem, a very iconic ecosystem, probably on par with the Banffs and the Jaspers and the Waterton Lakes and all, Glacier down in the US, like all these places. It is a truly iconic part of the province and arguably part of the world. So in that area that's known as the Great Bear Rainforest, all hunting for grizzly bears has been banned outright, meaning it doesn't matter if you're after the meat, doesn't matter if you're after the head, hide, and claws, no hunting as of November 30th of this year.
Mm-hmm.
In other parts of the province, which is a huge, obviously massive part of the province, we can still hunt grizzlies. We being residents and non-residents, but we can only hunt for meat legally. So we must take meat out of the bush or the mountains or the wild or the inlet or whatever. And we also must leave hide, head, and claws behind. That cannot be removed. Now, has there been any, just as an aside, has there been any additional detail provided there? Because when I first read it, it was couldn't leave the province. And then I heard it was no, like that has to stay in the bush. You can't have that on your person at all. Has there been any change or clarification there?
So just to kind of back it up a bit, Adam, I think when the minister announced what they were doing with the grizzly bear ban, I think there's a couple of things that are really important here. There's no consultation been done with anybody on this issue.
Yeah.
It's purely a public opinion ban.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important that we stress that it is public opinion. Why this is, it's not science-based wildlife management. It's none of that. So backing that up, it's what the minister relayed and how he presented and how that came out. I don't know if he got it a little more involved or excited and went further than he should have without having those consultations take place with First Nations, resident hunters, guide outfitters. So we really don't know where it's going. And I guess backing that up, I had a phone call on Sunday night where all the user groups are actually getting together. We had a very positive call. So BCWF, Wildlife Stewardship Council, White Sheep Society, Guide Outfitters, BCWF, I don't know if I said it or not, but basically just saying, you know what, we're going to formalize a response as a group to say we're not happy about that. So that's the groups recognizing that and then engaging the minister and the government on that issue. So that's kind of where it's at right now.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. And I was certainly going to get to the public opinion side of this. But I'm glad you jumped in because it is such a critical part of it. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we hunters, both non-resident and resident, can come to BC and still hunt grizzly bears in huge parts of the province. But we have to, as far as we know right now, can only take the meat out and must leave hide, head, and claws behind in the bush.
Yeah.
So to a lot of people, on both sides of the sort of, I guess, battle here, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? And the thing that I think that I know the hunting community is most up in arms about is, as you outlined, Chris, the fact that when this decision was passed down, it was communicated very clearly as not being based on scientific wildlife management principles, which is to date, unless I'm way out to lunch here, how almost all wildlife management decisions have been made, historically speaking.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how far you want to go back.
Yeah, sure. But
because I was reading some of the stuff you sent me on from Boone Crockett, and just coming back and how that formalized, and it's funny how words have been taken out of context and switched around and taken out of how the meaning was meant, and how people have twisted that into mean something else.
Yeah,
and obviously trophy hunting is the key word right there.
Trophy and sport, right?
And sport
are two words that have been completely. They've been stolen, right? I mean, there's no other way to put it. They've been stolen and rebranded. And on that note specifically, like that's I think the last point I want to make on this is, I've certainly backed off the firing line as far as how I initially reacted to this. But I did have a very strong initial reaction to this, and came out publicly on the Beyond the Kill podcast and took certain NGOs to task. And that's the real frustration for me. Like as per your story, Kelly, I completely agree that I think a lot of people that would have voted in favor of this ban simply just aren't educated, right, on the realities of the whole issue, right? And it is, as you outlined, an incredibly complex issue. But where I get incredibly frustrated and why I was so up in arms initially and continue to be in many ways is how public opinion was swayed and how public opinion was misled was through very dedicated efforts by certain NGOs that I will not give the honor of even naming on this podcast, outright lying, right? And feeding, and I mean like with a fire hose, into mainstream and social media, patently false information, completely sham science, and opinion letters and op-eds and papers, and some papers that were willing to publish them, information that utterly and completely pulled the wool over the eyes of the general population. And as we all know, with enough repetition, you see something enough, and you're like, no, I just assume that's the facts, right?
Yep. And
so, to your point, Chris, about this decision, from a governmental perspective, being based on public opinion polls and surveys, the thing I'm not going to let go of, and still walk around with a little wound about, is how that opinion was swayed, and how that was misled, that did in fact lead to this decision. So,
well, I think just to kind of hit on that point, I think that comes back to us, and so I always say out of a negative always comes a positive. So, we're taking this as a negative, but, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, is the positive perspective out of it would be it's a wake up call for us
Yeah.
that we're not doing our job, which is what you did today, Kelly, educating people, right? It's how do we tell people what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I think we have to kind of put our own play back in. And it's like, I was reading the articles that Adam sent me from Boone and Crockett, and there's some key words. And something that stuck with me was sporting. We're not sport hunters. And the key part of that was it's not a sporting event. And the key part of it was there's no referee telling us what's right or wrong or doing or whatever. It's not, to me, I don't think sport's the right word. To me, and we touched on it last time, hunting, whether you're a meat hunter, whether you're a so-called trophy hunter, and I'll kind of get into that definition in a second, but we're all hunters. Whether you're hunting with a bow, a gun, a black powder, a crossbow, or whatever. I don't care what you are. We're all hunters. We're all playing the same game. We're all doing the same thing. We want to harvest wildlife for consumption as we see fit. And then, like I said, there's that whole other gamut of the health scope and what we talked a bit earlier, what you did, Mike, this week. But, the play on trophy hunting, I think that's something that we really need to be, whether we change the word or whether we fight that word. But to me, a trophy hunter is a true conservation hunter.
Right.
He's the guy that's not going to impact population. He's looking for a specific animal, a mature animal, something that will benefit him. And everybody's definition as trophy is different. And I kind of alluded to back to when you guys first
some people's
hunting,
trophy
right?
is the meal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think it's everything, right? I think
Some
people
is the hide, or some people's the experience.
It's the whole. I think I come back to when you guys first started off. Like you guys have been hunting for 4 years now.
Yeah, we're going into our 4th season yet.
So when you first harvested your first animal, that was the ultimate thing. That was the elation, the whole product of getting into it and doing it.
2 years of nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1 season with nothing, and then and our 2nd season getting a doe, and that being a life-changing experience in so many ways. It's the first time you take the life from an animal, and I think your respect for wildlife in that moment just expands like you can't even measure how meaningful that is. And then when you butcher that animal for yourself and you feed your friends and family with it throughout the next year or whatever it might be, it's like it's something that just keeps giving back to you. So if you want to call that a trophy, a doe isn't necessarily something you hang on your wall as a trophy, but it's something, it's an experience, and it's a lot more than that too, that you hold dearly, you know what I mean? And it's something that I find very hard to explain to people unless they've experienced it for themselves. But I think the main thing for us is the amount of respect we have for the outdoors and for wildlife. And we had a lot of respect for those things beforehand, just growing up in the Kootenays and spending a lot of time outdoors, be it just camping or mountain biking and skiing and stuff like that. But that has just totally grown into something totally different now. And it's, it's hard to explain. But I think the word trophy, I think we do need to maybe get rid of that term, because from an outsider perspective, a trophy is something you hang on your wall. And I think when somebody who doesn't hunt hears that, they think that's the only thing that we're out there for, is just for the sake of hanging something on your wall and killing it for fun. Yeah. When that's so far from why we're out there. So
yeah, and I think that idea, that's what's turning a lot of the public against you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So
there's a couple things I wanted to mention in relation to like kind of the semantics here, right? So I just grabbed my phone here and I pulled up the definition of sporting. Okay. So number one is connected with or interested in sports. So that doesn't apply in the historical context of what was is it Sporting Classics was one of the really old, hunting and fishing magazines or something like that.
Oh, what was yeah?
It's always got like a art on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's So the second definition: fair and generous in one's behavior or treatment of others, especially in a game or contest. And if you read that Boone and Crockett material, like sporting, as it was intended to be used, was that second definition, right? And we have this catchphrase in our community, fair chase, right?
Yep.
Which is simply a simplified version of what I just read.
Yeah.
And so the unfortunate reality is both sporting, which now has just simply been shortened to sport, right, to make it sound transactional, I guess, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And trophy are words that we have lost. Like they have that ship has sunk. And I had recently had a conversation with a guy who's a listener and subscriber. Pete, shout out to you yet again, because you've gotten a couple of shout outs on some of the other episodes. But I have for a very long time felt like we needed to reclaim the word trophy, because I feel very strongly about the positive impact that even strict, sort of vilified trophy hunting has, right? And if you dig into the issue, despite how you may feel about the person's intentions for taking that animal's life, the net impact on the local economy, on the local environment, on that species is almost always positive when it comes to true trophy hunting. And I mean, like, the worst case scenario here, the dude or the gal that just wants to lop a head off and stick it on their wall amongst the other 30 heads on their wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be clear, I don't have a problem with that. Without
that, there would be a lot less lions, right?
Yeah, well, Africa would be a ghost land, right? So I have for a very long time, because I had to educate myself on that whole sort of subtopic of this hunting and conservation world.
Yeah.
Took it very seriously to try to educate or re-educate people on what it means to be a so-called trophy hunter. I was having this conversation with this guy, Pete, and he made a very convincing argument to say, look, we've lost it. Like, it's dead. It's gone, right? Trophy and sport, we'll never get that back in the court of public opinion. We just need a different word entirely, right? Whether that's adventure hunting or whatever. Like, I'm not saying I have the answer here, but it was a real sort of mind shift for me, because I felt very strongly that we need to defend that position, right? And educate people on, trophy hunting, and how that, as maybe emotionally doesn't feel good to the person that's not familiar with it. There is, as you did, Kelly, with your people at work, there are things that we can explain to kind of convince them, right? And I'm now not convinced that that's the case. And there's sort of a liberating feeling in letting that go, right? Because it is a very steep uphill battle to kind of retake that hill if we wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we touched on it last time too. There's two ways to change people's minds: persuasion or force.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in today's world, it's persuasion, and it's presenting our side of the story and how we move forward with that. That's, I think, where you're going with it. And I was just going to back up to the comment that you made about the change after you harvested your first animal.
Mm-hmm.
Probably changed you personally.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I know we kind of touched on it last time. It's about, people wonder how you can take the life of an animal and just how we move into that scope. It's not the celebration. I don't think TV's done us any favors on that.
Right.
I think it's we need to move forward with how do we change that perception of what, or I guess is, how do you explain harvesting that animal into the depths that you go through, the range of emotions that you enter,
the effort that goes into it, right?
The effort.
I mean, there's so many pieces,
emotions.
Well, and there's so many emotions. There's so many pieces to the story, right?
Yeah.
And we in the hunting community, I feel, have done a poor job of telling the full story. Yeah, I mean, there's exceptions to that rule. Of course, I mean, Stephen Rennell is a great example. You know, what people like the Foss brothers do, or the guys at SeaCat or Con Outdoors, or I'm sure I'm forgetting a slew of people, right? But, you know, there's maybe 5% of our content that would fall into that category, right? Mm-hmm. And the rest of it tells a certain version of the hunting story. And look, like, I want to be clear. I grew up on those stories, right? Like 20 deer getting killed in a 22-minute episode.
Yeah.
Sweet, right?
Yeah.
I liked it. I didn't know any better, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that it's not that I didn't know any better. I didn't have enough experience to know any better.
I was going to say, it was a quest for knowledge to learn stuff.
Yeah, exactly, right?
And I know as I've a little older than you guys, but I've evolved through that component. And like I said, I've talked to you guys before about your growth in the 4 years to where you guys have come from to where you are right now is like, it's astounding. And I know you guys attribute it to talking to other people and stuff, for sure. But the range of emotions when you harvest that animal range from sadness, respect. I don't know if I know I'm missing a whole bunch in there.
The thing I saw, I think it was last week. Have you guys seen this? I don't even remember what the name of it was, so it obviously wasn't that effective a marketing campaign, but there was this big push on social last week. I think Ranella was reposting. I actually don't remember how I came across it, but it's a documentary about food wastage in North America. And I mean, it would be US focused, but let's expand to say North America. And 40% of all food produced for our consumption goes to waste. Right?
Yes.
So
brutal,
yeah. Absolutely brutal, right? And people say, "Oh, we got to stop world hunger." Well, there's no bloody world hunger if we just get better at using our food. And so, as a hunter or an angler, right? How many times have you cooked too big a steak or too big a roast and been like, just sort of fork that into the garbage, right? Or give it to the dog? You never fucking do that.
Yeah.
With something that you've participated in the taking of its life, right?
Yeah.
And that's like, that is probably one of the most powerful things we could share with people. And, on top of obviously the emotions and the physical side of things and all the failures that come with, trying to take an animal, right? I mean, when we get back to, sort of public misconceptions, right? I think they've also been sold a bill of goods that we, get out of the truck, take 5 steps and start blasting. Right. And sure, that happens. Right. But that's certainly not the norm. Right. And there's just so many subcontexts to this story that we in the community for the past little while have not put as concerted effort into telling as we probably could have.
Yeah. Agree. And I think that's something that hunters as a whole need to do a better job of, which we've already said a couple times here. But even with the news of this, the trophy hunt ban for grizzly bears, I was looking at some of the comments on news sites or through Facebook or whatever, and I have to say that the hunters who were commenting on there were not doing a good job for the hunting community. They were being disrespectful. It just doesn't reflect well on us, and I think the guys who could do a good job of explaining it weren't commenting at all, right? Because they don't want to get involved with this argument. So, and then the other thing that comes back to as well is with social media is if you want to share a photo of your hunt, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. But if you just put up a photo of a dead bear or a dead deer or whatever, or a rabbit, and not explain the story behind that photo, then someone's going to come up with their own story and their own theories about hunting. But if, like we were just talking about here, if you explain this whole experience from the beginning of hunting season to that very moment, then I think it'll click with a lot more people and they'll understand. But you can't just be putting these things out there and expect people to, respect a bloody, gory photo and understand everything that went into that. They'll have no idea, right?
Did we talk about your rabbit photos?
No.
So, Mike, actually kudos because you went out rabbit hunting on the weekend.
Yeah.
So you get a few rabbit, and there's 3 pictures, right? The first picture is Mike holding a rabbit by its back legs. Trophy shot.
Yeah,
right?
trophy. It was a big one too.
Yeah.
Trophy rabbits. They were big, man.
They were huge.
As
Yeah.
their size.
Yeah.
They're big.
I did not expect to see them that size. But anyway, sorry, I digress.
So if you post just that picture, right? You throw it on your
Hold on, I
Facebook.
can't resist. That's because you were standing 10 feet behind it, right?
Yeah. I had my arm out as far as it would go.
You had a selfie stick holding the rabbit.
Oh, they're the size of a small cat.
They're
up
big,
there.
yeah.
They're big.
Yeah.
Anyways, if you just post that picture, like what's the response going to be on your Facebook, right? Especially with a rabbit.
Rabbits are
a lot
cute.
of
Well, it's funny
folks.
because I think did you have one about 2 weeks earlier, I think, Mike, when the season opened up?
No, I don't.
Somebody else had
think
a
so.
picture of a rabbit that they'd harvested.
Yeah.
And there were some comments around it.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're saying is one was, I didn't know rabbit season was open and
Mhm.
you could hunt
Right.
rabbits. So just that general question around, where the hunting season was, but then to move forward. So back to what you're saying, Kelly, is where it was, but it was just a picture of the rabbit with nothing else further after that one.
Yeah. So to non-hunters, that's like their immediate response is, oh man, why is he taking, like, okay, he's killing a rabbit. That maybe they don't mind, but then you're posting it on Facebook and they're like, why are you posting pictures of dead rabbits on Facebook? But so what Mike did was he posted the photo to Instagram, and then immediately after, when he got home, posted another photo of the 3 rabbits butchered and on a plate, clean, like just, this is meat now. It looks like chicken on a plate.
Yeah.
And then after that, you had your beer braised rabbit legs, like really fancy with the bone, kind of like a lamb chop arrangement, right? So
But
I
if
think
nobody
if
had
you
seen that picture, like if you didn't know where it had come from and you hadn't posted, I would thought we were in a 5-star restaurant. Like
Right.
It was exceptional. I was
yeah,
like
like
that
France
looks
or
really
something,
good.
right?
That was straight up hipster foodism.
Totally,
It was
totally.
phenomenal.
And they do serve rabbit quite a bit in like Paris and stuff like
Yeah.
that,
Oh,
right?
absolutely, yeah.
So you put those 3 pictures together, and all of a sudden, to most people, non-hunter or hunter, it makes sense.
You built a visual bridge.
Yeah.
Right.
And it shows that it's a full day event too, right?
Yeah, great
So
point.
You
Yeah,
go
great
out.
point.
I was up at 4:30. I think I set my alarm for. Went way up there, got those rabbits, came back, butchered them, put them in the fridge, came back later that night, and then turned that into a meal. Right? It's a lot of work, and it puts it into perspective, even with small game like that.
Yeah.
How much work goes into it. And 3 rabbits. It was just my wife and I. We hardly put a dent in it that night. And the next night we made nachos with it, which was like,
Wow.
oh man, like the best nachos I've ever had in my life.
I bet.
You said it tasted like dark turkey meat?
Yeah. I guess it'd be like, it is a darker meat. I don't know if you ever had duck before.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's similar to that, I guess. But yeah, it was good. And I always, I know if it's good when my wife goes like a little beyond excited about it, because she knows that the wild game that I cook is important to me. So she always be like, yeah, it was really good. And I could tell like she thought it was okay.
Yeah.
But the rabbit, she's like, you got to go out and get some more rabbits. I'm like, okay, I'll go out there again this week. I'm not going to argue with that.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's another cool thing too, is us being non-hunters. Ashley didn't have any hunters in her family growing up, but she's fully into this whole thing now that we've had a lot of meat in the freezer, and she's totally behind it, which is great. It's just a cool transition for
Yeah.
the whole family and all your friends and family too.
Well, and
Yep.
that's I think at least where we have to put every ounce of energy we have is into our immediate circle, right? And because we were talking about this before we started the recording, right? Is sharing, the harvest, the kill, however we want to call it, the game meat that we bring home is such a critical component of I think why most hunters do it, right?
Mhm.
And that's an opportunity, especially if you're bringing in extended family or friends that don't hunt, to really, you've got them by the short and curlies in a good way,
Yeah.
to educate and enlighten them on all these these sort of sub themes, right, and these subtopics, and explain what went into it, and talk about the animal, right? I mean, you mentioned the rabbit and your wife loving the meat. Well, believe it or not, I know not all three of you will believe it, but probably to some of the audience that might not, the bear meat, and in particular bear sausage, is probably the most popular game meat that I've ever brought home. I mean, nothing beats, an elk steak or a moose steak, or maybe a sheep steak, but for like just general consumption, beyond some of the best cuts, we went through our bear meat faster than anything else.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's something I've seen over and over again as an argument, especially on Twitter. I've watched a few, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Arguments on there. And they're saying it's absolute bullshit that you guys want to consume bear as meat.
Yeah.
And when we first started hunting, we were under the assumption that bear wasn't something that we would want to go after.
Yeah. So you kind of relate to that.
Yeah.
Why they're saying that, but again, it's
once
education.
You do the research, you find out there's a lot of factors that go into good meat. It could be, the season. It could be that animal's diet, but that's the same for any animal. It doesn't matter what you're eating. And so Kelly and I decided, black bear is something we want to go after. And then we had talked to, I think it was Jesse, who was telling us grizzly bear meat is no different. It's
brown bear and a black bear is a bear.
Yeah.
And they have the same diet.
Yeah. And then
so people eat both.
Yeah, Jesse posted a photo of a double smoked bear ham that looked amazing. And same thing, he said it's like a favorite with the family. And it looked like absolutely amazing. So I think on the bear side of things, that's something that people need to find out, is that, we do eat it. And that's why we're going after it. It's another source of protein. It's not just to kill the thing and hang it on your wall. There's so much more than that. And leaving the hide and the paws and stuff behind is ridiculous, because that's just one more usable portion of the animal. And that's why people are
I think I was listening to Ranella, and he was talking about how the bear is one of the most useful animals that you can harvest.
Without a doubt. I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Without
Oil,
a doubt.
hide.
The fat, you can use that for cooking and all kinds of stuff.
You make soap out of the lard. You can, I think it was Ranella that was saying that when some of the fall bears he's taken in Alaska, the fat's literally blue because they're eating so many
blueberries.
Right?
So it has a berry quality to it.
Yeah.
Well,
you go back into, I was like reading those BC history books from, the earlier period of time. So, late 20s, that kind of thing. Those outdoorsmen and those trappers, they did not survive without shooting a bear.
Oh, no.
Right.
That was the first animal they shot. It was the grease for their boots.
Yeah.
It was the lard for cooking.
Yeah.
Like, it was the most important animal to shoot before they shot moose, elk, or any other species.
Right. Absolutely.
So we've kind of lost that perspective as society's changed. I kind of see it coming back a bit of how we can use and how we use bears when we harvest that animal.
Yeah.
Well, and that brings up an interesting point I hadn't thought of, Chris, is, we, as much as we, joke about the whole hipster thing.
Need a refill, Kelly.
Give him the salty Scott stout I just opened.
Nice.
It's rather nice.
Nice.
There's this whole, as it has been popularized, the hipster movement, right? Which is an appreciation for, craft and artisanal things and sort of the old ways of doing stuff. Well, there's another area we could go after, right? Is to like show people what you can do with the full animal, right? And why leaving hide, head, and claws is a distinct waste, right? I mean, and Shane brought this point up in his most recent podcast with me is, if we are going to take the life of an animal, we shouldn't waste any of it, or absolutely minimize the wastage as much as possible. I think most hunters would agree with that.
Yeah.
Right. Coming back to the bear side of things, in particular black bears, you guys had Hank Shaw on your podcast, right? You ever read his recipe about black bear dumplings?
No.
It's a Russian dumpling sort of recipe. look it up. It sounds phenomenal. A lot of work, but sounds phenomenal.
Right.
But he brings up some incredibly interesting stuff in that article that leads to the recipe. That the term bear market, right? Like one of the most common terms we discuss in the news on any given day comes from a literal meat market in New York City that was the best source to find bear meat.
Wow.
And I don't remember what the cookbook was. It was like let's say it's Cook's Illustrated. It wasn't, but something like that effect, like the Reader's Digest, Country Almanac cooking book back in, decades ago, had bear recipes in it. Like it was a well accepted and viable protein source for vast tracts of North America. And they are so bloody, black bears in particular, are so bloody numerous across almost all of North America. There's obviously going to be exceptions there, but for the most part, they're doing incredibly well.
Yeah.
And so, this concept that we can't eat bears, either species, and shouldn't eat them is just crazy, right? Like it is.
Yeah, I think there's some countries in Europe too, like Romania, where they actually prefer bear over wild boar. Yeah. And the average age of the bears there is like 3 years, whereas here it's 5 to 6 years old. So,
right.
I don't, obviously different conservation methods, but just to go back to the food and the bear, like they prefer that.
Well, and to your point, Chris, about like going back and reading sort of historical accounts of exploration or trapping or whatever. Do you guys know the book Undaunted Courage? It was written by the guy who wrote Band of Brothers, Stephen E. Ambrose, I think. But it's the story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. And in that...
Yeah, I haven't read it yet, but I've started reading it.
Good book. Very good book. And in that, I don't know how many different times they say, oh yeah, grizzly bear walked up on the Missouri River breaks or wherever they were, black bear here, black bear there. Like you said, first animal they took because they could use so much of it. And if I could just for a second talk about then, kind of go back to the trophy thing for a minute, most bear hunters, certainly not all, but I think most, especially if we're talking about black bears, will take, all the edible parts, and often the hide. How many deer hunters take the hide?
None.
Right? And why can't that be turned into gloves, belts,
right?
Mitts, right? That's just as much wastage, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, we've got a lot of work to do, obviously, on the bear side of things, on a lot of fronts, but, I think there's a lot of pieces to the bear discussion that are ripe for opportunity. Like I'm saying this is a positive, right? Like they are ripe for opportunity for us to tell a better story, really.
Well, I think society as a whole, I think we should be looking to tell that story. And just to back up, Adam, just on, the North American wildlife conservation model and the success stories we've had with it is like, so you alluded to black bears. Let's just allude to grizzly bears. Reintroduction, well, not reintroduction, but they've reappropriated themselves into the U.S., Yellowstone, potentially looking at having grizzly bear seasons back in the U.S., through Wyoming. I think they're down into New Mexico. Look at the way they've expanded in BC. And I've always said this, I haven't got any scientific information to back it up, but I always maintain that there's more grizzly bears in BC now since white man's been here. Since we opened up the country, or settlers opened up the country, for a better word. But you take that scope to mountain sheep, and we come back to, I guess, where we started off, around Boone and Crockett and the conservation model that was set up by Teddy Roosevelt. And, it's kind of ironic that Yellowstone Park was set aside as a place for wildlife to be there forever, right?
Well, and it should be clear, made clear to those who maybe don't have their history as up to speed as they could. Again, this was Shane that brought this to light in the podcast with me, but one of the first acts of those that founded the so-called trophy record keeping system were those first initiatives they went after were purely preservationist. Pelican Island, Yellowstone.
Yep.
Nothing to do with hunting. Protect it outright.
Yeah. protect the species.
Right.
Yeah. And back in those days, elk, turkey, all those species would have been on the endangered list if there was one, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they were just, every species you look at that point when they established Yellowstone was in dire states. I forget the numbers. I mean, it was in that article you sent me, Adam, but you look at it now and you look at where our sheep are. So I guess the biggest success would be white-tailed deer.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
they're through the
everywhere.
roof, right?
Yeah.
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 So, you start to look at that stuff, and I think that's, we kind of go back to that old message of what was. But if we can take the scope of that and put it into something new, and I think we need to revisit back. And I think where we're going with this is how we use an animal, exactly what you did with the rabbit or the hares, Mike.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how we do that. So, one thing I think we should be doing is maybe we should be publishing those recipes out there. If it's either through you guys' podcasts and you have a Instagram, there's a recipe for this or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just a bigger way of sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and if I could just add in, Chris, I think we need to do better than just recipes.
Yeah.
Because what you did, Mike, is what we need to do, right? Is that full process, right? In the restaurant industry, right? There's maybe this trend has slightly waned, but for at least a period there, the whole concept of nose to tail was like the thing, right?
Yeah.
People would pay top dollar in fancy ass restaurants across, Canada and the US to have a nose to tail experience, right? And we, whether we call it, field to table or bush to bowl or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, hunters are living that not every day, but on a regular basis, right? And I think you did just an incredible job, Mike, of bridging that gap, because maybe it's an unfair thing to say, but I think we really have to handhold people to the table, to use that to the dinner plate, to use that pun, right?
Yeah.
And make that connection for them and show them almost every step along the way, not just the kill, but also not just the recipe, right? Because once it's just the, this nice looking meal on a plate, there isn't that emotional connection to it anymore. Not in the sense that they're going to get reserved or opposed to what we're doing.
I was emotional. I was inviting myself over for dinner when I saw the pictures.
Yeah. I try and equate it to gardening for somebody who's a non-hunter. If you're into gardening, think about the pride that goes into something you've grown. Say it's a zucchini or a cucumber, and you share it with your neighbor because you've got more than you can eat within the amount of time that it's going to last for. I think people can make that same connection of pride because you put a lot of time into the soil and planting everything and watering it and taking care of it and pruning it or whatever you have to do to create the best fruits and vegetables you can grow on your own. And to watch people eat it is exciting, and to share it is even better. And so I think there's a lot of crossover between hunting and gardening. It's the same thing. It's providing food for yourself and sharing it.
I think it comes back to our roots. You touched on this earlier, I think, Adam, in the week when we were talking about how much we enjoy sharing our table fare.
Yeah.
And how we always, like, as hunter-gatherers, we did that.
Yeah.
When you harvest an animal, where did everybody go around? They were around the fire, right?
Yeah.
Shane's touched on that numerous times.
Yeah, no, and it's it's one of the most like fundamentally human interactions you can have, right? Is to somebody in your let's use the the cachet term tribe, whether it's you or somebody else, goes out and gets wild protein, brings it back to the tribe. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's your group of friends, maybe it's your local community, whatever it is, extended family, and you share it, right? Not everyone has to go out and do that, right? But it shouldn't be such a mental leap to be in favor of that, right?
Well, let's make the mental leap. It's a dinner party.
No, exactly, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We've just converted it to an easier saying or something that feels better than what you're describing, Adam. And maybe we've got to make these correlations back and forth. The dinner party is the same thing as what we did with sharing our food as hunter-gatherers.
That's a huge point,
right?
Yeah. Huge point, yeah.
I think I got to throw in a plug for that Netflix show, Barbecue.
Oh, yeah. No, you mentioned that last time, yeah.
But they go to like 10 different countries,
Mhm.
like New Zealand, and they go to Texas and go to, I don't know, Europe and Japan and all these places. And they all have their own word for barbecue. Mexico, barbacoa or whatever. So they all have their own method of barbecuing that's traditional to them. And it's just, they kind of follow that day, because most of these barbecues are a full day of preparation. And they're killing the animal right there, and they have the pigs on sticks and logs or whatever. Some of them are burying the animals in the ground for a long amount of time, and some of them are gutting the animal and filling it up with like super red hot rocks, basically.
Yeah,
and they're cooking it from the inside out. So they go through all these different methods, but they're also, the moral of the story is, look at all these people across the globe, and they're all doing the exact same thing, right? They're all getting everybody together and having a big dinner. Everybody's laughing. The family's around. It's something we've been doing for thousands of years.
Oh, well, you know what? We were wrong, Chris. You and I are talking about this, field the table or feed the needy.
Yeah.
We just need to have the biggest barbecue party on the planet. Every city, every town, hunters come together, and everyone puts some meat in, and we just say, open.
Yeah.
Everyone come by.
Free barbecue.
Free barbecue.
That'd be awesome. Get some of the best chefs in town and some of the best.
We are
local
we are
organic.
we are accepting beer sponsors right now. You can reach out to either the Rookie Hunters or
Yeah.
Adam at Beyond the Kill, please.
Yeah.
Or tequila, right? We were good with tequila too.
Tequila was good.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Let's not discriminate. Any liquor, any booze.
Yeah.
We're accepting sponsorships right now.
Well, I was
It's a
gonna
great
say-
idea. I mean, we have it in common with everyone around the globe. Fire and
No,
food.
it's a
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
but that's you and I, obviously, Chris, you and I talked about this. It was this week, right?
Yeah,
just
I think it was this
I guess
week.
that Red Bull's wearing off. But there's, I think that like that communal side of this, right? I was about to say that provider side of it, and I hesitate to use that word because it has, I think, to some people, chauvinistic sort of connotations and sort of almost domineering connotations, which is not what I meant if I had said provision or providing, but that is such a key piece of why we
I think the key word is sharing.
no, exactly,
Yeah.
right? They like the communal or sharing or whatever, like that. That's a critical part of the story that gets told, right? I mean, you see that in shows and those shorts on whatever social media channel you're into. But it's one little salmon fry in the stream or in the river, right? And we need to just like that's the kind of stuff we should be fire hosing, to counter the patently false information that's getting fed to the general public, right? Like that's those like because that is so approachable, right? Like that's not even reaching across the aisle, right? Like that's just like reaching to the person beside you, being like, "Hey, you want to come for some kick-ass barbecued meat?" Unless they're vegetarian or vegan, they're probably going to go, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Definitely.
Well, I think the other thing, and kind of not to side rail this into politics, but I know Jesse's talked about this quite a bit, is like there's the public opinion side, but then there's us as hunters that have to get out and talk about this kind of stuff. Go to your MPs and tell them why hunting's important and why animals and wildlife are important. And I think the goal is, and why I get a little frustrated, is the political parties I don't think should be using wildlife management as a tool to get elected.
Yeah, good point.
They should be, the science should be legislated, and whoever gets put into power should have to abide by the rules that were put in place by the scientific information, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of backwards right now. So I don't know. I think that's a bit of a problem.
Well, I think you're exactly right there, Kelly. And I've pondered this, and I pondered it today. I was talking to Mike Southern today, right? And sometimes we kind of spitball some ideas, and I had a radical one today. It's like, so wildlife is owned by the Crown, and they're supposed to manage it for the public.
Yep.
In my opinion, if you don't base it on scientific wildlife management, then you're not managing it for the public, whether it's viewing, whether it's harvest, usable, whatever we want to call it. Are they liable for not managing wildlife for us in that way?
Wow. That's a huge, I have no idea. That's a great question.
So I took it one step further. Can we take him to court? Now, there's all sorts of dynamics and questions around that, but I guess the way I was looking at it is to get people thinking about around the whole scope of the thing and how things have been done, and exactly what you're talking about, Kelly. You're feeling the frustration of not being able to do something because politicians are playing with something that you love. And Mike said it the same way. The politicians are messing with his enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if I could put it in perspective, it'd be like in Kelowna, we're gonna shut all the golf courses down. And you're not gonna be able to allow to golf because it's perfect deer habitat.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm probably gonna get criticized tremendously for that comment, but
Where do I sign?
Yeah. You're also wasting a lot of water.
but the comparisons, right? So change the perspective on how what you're trying to tell us what we're doing is impacting on what we think we're doing.
Well, and so that's a great, I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because it reminded me of something that I think touched on that last audio, but what about Whistler? What about Revelstoke?
Oh yeah.
What about these ski hills, right? So if we went to, like, just to kind of put this in context, and so, I mean, I'm going to assume that virtually everyone that listens to this is going to be kind of on our side for the most part. I'm sure there's going to be some exceptions out there.
Well, so let's just take it one step further, Adam. We don't really care if they're on our side.
No, fair point.
We want to engage in the conversation.
Exactly. No, good, very, very good point. Very good point. So you're right. But where I was going with that is, if you have somebody, this is to our listeners, if you have somebody that is, let's say, not on side with this, good. Like, as you said, Chris, like, we need to be having those discussions at a grassroots level, like you outlined today, Kelly. Like, that is the most powerful stuff we can possibly commit our time and energy to right now. But, to the listeners, if you have people that that maybe have voiced their support of this whole grizzly hunting ban, or to American listeners, if you have people that are kind of like, what's the big deal, right? And those people ski, ask them if they'd pay a 20 to 25% surcharge on their lift ticket to go back into the habitat.
For sure.
Right? Because those operations are just raping and pillaging the mountains that they, from a standpoint of the habitat, right? I'm not, and I'm a skier and a snowboarder. I'd love to do it. But, we have to, I think in certain ways when it comes to some of these harder discussions, like you had a really great approachable discussion, Kelly, and I'm not advocating for getting in people's face, because I think that's a mistake we've made.
Yeah. No, it has to be a natural.
It has to be a natural, right?
Yeah.
But like Ranella did when that person on the Starbucks podcast brought up the point about the wolves, he wasn't an a-hole about it, but he just pointedly said, if you're passionate about wolves, what have you done? She's like, well, I signed this petition, or, did something that was, kind of superficial. She's like, I don't know what else to do. And he kind of called BS on it and said, well, there's a lot of things you could do. And us hunters have been doing all of them. Right. And so I think, when we're having these conversations with people, as you said, Kelly, it needs to be based on the facts. But we also have to put some hypothetical and relevant context around it, right? Because, for us, we pay a surcharge for the opportunity to an extent, right?
Yeah.
And most of us are very passionate about, habitat issues and conservation issues. And I know I can think of one guy who's a good friend of mine who is very quick to, throw shit against the wall when it comes to so-called trophy hunting, right? And, he owns like 7 pairs of skis, 6 different outfits, right?
Yep.
All, petroleum based. I got nothing wrong with petroleum, but, if you're gonna throw stones in a glass house, look in your own closet, right? And so,
well, the other thing about throwing stones, which, some of the NGOs and parties that you mention, we shouldn't mention, but we won't mention. But some of those parties are throwing stones. And I think hunters also have to realize that throwing a stone back isn't the best approach. And some of them are just, minor things. We'll say, well, they're not using the facts. And then on the other hand, some of the hunters are saying, we only hunt the oldest bear. Like that's their justification.
Also not true. Yeah.
Which is also not
Yeah,
true. So
absolutely.
like we both have to kind of put everything to the side and say, okay, let's actually discuss the facts. I'm open to say, you know, I said this in the past and maybe that was incorrect, and they have to do the same thing, hopefully.
Yeah.
Try to find a middle ground, but
I
that's
think
the
it comes
hard
back
part.
to our discussion before too about maybe, you know, let's put ourselves out there. We're gonna have to put ourselves. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm all in. If you guys want to go to Whistler and we have a podcast in Whistler and we start talking to
Podcast
people.
from Longhorn.
Yeah. And on that point, I think anybody who's benefiting from our natural resources, be it for enjoyment, financially, whatever it might be, needs to be putting back
Great
into
point.
our
Great point.
and as far as I'm aware, I think hunters are the only ones who are really putting back in. There's no tax on outdoor gear, or like you said, ski hills aren't obligated. Neither are ecotourism outfits. They don't have to put any money back into our natural resources, which is not good. But if everybody was, I think we'd all be sort of on the same team and feeling like, yeah, the hunters are putting money back in, the rock climbers are, the snowboarders, skiers, tourists, everybody's putting back in and putting money into what makes BC special and what it is. So,
And I think what's important is if somebody is listening to all this and they still don't agree with hunting, period, morally, for some reason, I think the important thing to ask for them to ask a hunter is, well, what's important to you as a hunter?
Right.
And I think it's like what makes BC special, that whole talk, and what would happen if all the animals disappeared? Hunters would lose what they're passionate about, just the activity itself. But like we've mentioned, we're obviously super passionate about the species of all these animals. So instead of kind of using the argument of killing an animal as a way to antagonize the hunters, why don't we use the hunters as a tool? Because what they want most of all is the sustainable use of wildlife, and not even use, but just sustainable wildlife
For everybody.
balanced.
For everybody, right?
yeah. I just dropped $210 on tags today.
Yeah, we probably won't fill it.
Yeah, I'll probably
Maybe
get
one
it.
of them.
Maybe one or two.
Do we know
most.
what percentage of that goes into?
We have a podcast with Jesse a while back, and
Okay.
he dives into. I can't rattle
It's
the
in
numbers off,
the
but-
regulations as well. I think there's a little side note, sort of how that money's divided. Unfortunately, a lot of it goes back into general revenue,
Yeah.
but they're
So
fighting.
that's where that new wildlife funding model came into play.
Exactly.
I'm not quite sure where it is in the
Yeah,
development because
we
that's
should
still moving
Do
forward.
a follow up on what that is,
Yeah.
but still, though, some of it is
No,
going
exactly.
back,
Yeah,
right?
no,
Not all
I
of
was
it,
I
but-
was just more curious because
Yeah.
I wasn't 100%
Yeah.
certain myself.
So all your
Well,
HCTF
and that's it.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's a good example of, hunters saying, we might use that as an argument, right? We're putting a ton of money and all the money, all this stuff back into conservation, but maybe we have to look at that and actually determine, well, what exactly is going where?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we can't just use that blanket argument as a defense, right? Because then they're going to pick that apart, and then we're not getting to a closer stance.
So the information for HCTF stuff, it's actually pretty spectacular what's going on. I sit on a special sheep's permit committee.
And the HGTF,
HCTF is Habitat Conservation Trust Fund.
yep.
And so out of that, we have two tags within the province, one that gets auctioned off for non-resident, and then one through LEH. So those monies that come into the province through that non-resident tag are a fairly substantial amount of money, but it's too bad I didn't research it prior to coming on here. But if you go to the HCTF website, they've got all their spending, what we've spent from special sheep permits, and what's gone back on the ground into conservation. So I think in the last 16 years, if I say a figure, it's probably going to be a lie, but it's I think it's in that $3 to $5 million range, and I may be low with that figure. But I guess if I could put it in perspective for people on,
Chris, hold on. Is that but both the resident and the non-resident?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah. I remember sitting in Vancouver and we were trying to figure out how we were going to spend $100,000 on sheep projects that year. And I think we had like $220,000 of funding requests. and we're sitting in Vancouver, and it was the year that all those trees blew down in Stanley Park.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to, I don't know, I think it was on the radio or the news or something. In one day, and of course with Jimmy Patterson helping out, they had something like $3 million to restore Stanley Park from all those trees blowing down. And I'm thinking, $3 million, I could do all the sheep projects within the province with that, right?
Yeah.
So there's the perspective of what we're up against. Some trees blow down. We're trying to maintain sheep populations with the province, habitat improvement, transplants, whatever it may have been at the time. And we're messing around with $100,000. But because something like that happened, the perspective of how that was marketed through the news, the media, and the funding that came back. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just, to me, it was
There's a gap. There's a huge gap.
There was a gap in the disparity between how people value wildlife compared to what's in their backyard, I guess.
Yeah.
And if I could just speak to the gap for a second, like I was living in Van when that happened, and it was sad. Stanley Park is an iconic part of Vancouver, but it's gonna sound maybe a little bit harsh, but like Mother Nature fucking sucks.
Mother Nature's a bitch.
Right? And whether it's a fire or countless fires like we've had this year, or a storm, or, high water or whatever. I mean, we had flooding in Kelowna this year. That happens. And that's not, I'm not diminishing that. Like, I don't want that to sound to the people of BC like
that we don't care.
That I don't care about Stanley Park, but like you said, Chris, like, yes, the loss of a very old tree, I honestly feel is a sad thing. Like, I stand in awe of many of, especially coming from Ontario, going, into the North Shore. My parents live up on the Sunshine Coast now, going up there and seeing some of these trees. It's mind boggling. It's literally almost not, comprehensible.
Yeah.
But if we contrast that against the loss of bighorns or stone sheep, right, or Roosevelt elk, right, or something like that, like,
well, even a better perspective is Mother Nature's been doing this for millions of years. And these species have evolved through how she's thrown those changes, whether it's evolution, you can term it however you want. I call it Mother Nature with, like I say, we touched on fires and flooding, but the scope of that landscape changing, it may have, again, it's a positive and negative effect. From the wildfire perspective, it's negative right now. And, my heart goes out to anybody that lost property or lost their house. I just can't imagine that'd be like losing a child. But the value for wildlife in those wildfires
it's huge.
It's huge. Yeah. I mean, and I was reading something today. It's almost, I think it's 40 years after the fire where the value of that fire actually diminishes to no point. But I think it's from 4 to 25 years.
Right.
It's a max production.
Well, we've got a perfect example right behind us right now, right?
And what's so incredible about that point, Mike, is, coming from the coast just over a year ago now, we talk about the coast being so, biodiverse. And it is, right? I mean, it obviously is. But there's so much of it that you can't see.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I've spent literally hundreds, if not thousands of hours, running around the trails of the North Shore since I moved there, whatever it was, 14 years ago. And I saw, I don't know, maybe a half dozen deer.
Right.
Half dozen bears. Right. In the first 6 months of living where we do, which is in, the area where the big burn was in 2003, I saw more raptors, more vultures, more songbirds, more deer, more rodents than I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Like it's incredible, right? And if just to make sure, because when you talked about your heart going out to those that were affected by the wildfires, the points I made about Stanley Park were specific to Stanley Park, not about the wildfires to those listening. Like you said, Chris, my heart absolutely goes out to people that lost property or anything that suffered in any way from those. So I don't want those comments to sound like I was diminishing that side of it.
No.
But coming back to that, that the gap that's there, that's what I was getting at is, people will stand up and get behind, cleaning up Stanley Park, millions of dollars, right? In a natural event, a sad event, but a natural event, right?
Yeah.
And yet if we wanted that much money raised for stone sheep, right? For something that is almost certainly going to be because of us that they're impacted. Habitat loss, habitat infringement, disease, right? We'd have a hard time raising that money, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well,
and
the other example is steelhead.
Oh, yeah.
Like
great.
Thompson and Chilko River steelhead. There were 6,000 of them in 1985. There's 600 now.
Yeah.
Wow.
But nobody sees it because they're in the river, right?
In the water, sighted of mine.
So,
And they don't even know why.
yeah. And I'm sure that if people knew that, you get a ton of support.
Yeah.
But it's just not in their forefront, right?
But that's kind of the crux of the issue, right? Is we in the hunting and angling community haven't done a very good job of making that a key part of the discussion and putting that at the forefront and forcing that to the forefront, right? We talk, as we started here, talking about Jurassic Classic, and that's a phenomenal thing, right? But we're pretty proud about what we do, and we should be. I'm not saying we shouldn't be, but I think the time has come for us to step up yet again, right? I mean, and Chris, you said, we can look back, right, and we can talk about Roosevelt and George Bird Grinnell and Leopold and all these people, right?
Yeah.
And say, look at what they did, and let's, represent them. Well, we need the new versions of that.
Exactly.
Right? For the new world that we live in, right? And it is very different from back then. And there's just so much that we, I think, can do collectively to bring up, so many of these issues that we've covered in the episode right now.
Yeah, I think the moral of what we've covered today is that we need to do a better job of representing what hunting is and sharing the full story and the experience. And we have tools right now that are working against us, which is usually social media. But we also have platforms like podcasting, which probably work more in our favor. But non-hunters are not necessarily going to listen to this. They're not going to seek it out. But they are going to come across the stuff that we post through social media. So I think we definitely need to do a better job on sharing the experience, like I said. But also, if you are going to comment on very controversial issues, we all need to do a better job of sharing science-backed information and not getting heated about the
reactionary
whole thing and saying stupid shit that's not going to help anybody. So,
I think it comes back to being mindful and respectful of where we are.
Yep.
And I picked up on a comment, and I think it was off the Gritty Bowman, the podcast, and it was when rationale becomes emotional.
Right.
All right. When I first heard it, it's like it took a minute for me to digest. But once it started to digest, it's the same thing. It's when we take rational arguments or science-based information and we make it emotional or public opinion. Right? It's the same thing. So it's like taking those key words and actually put them in certain perspectives. And I think one thing, and we've kind of skirted it, and I picked it up to the, I don't know if it was last week or this week, but it's footprints. The footprint we leave as a hunter, the footprint, and we touched on it as a skier, the footprint we touched on it as a golfer.
Yep.
We all have a footprint. We all have an impact. The biggest thing for wildlife is going to be the footprint that we leave to move forward around habitat, access, all that stuff.
Yeah, great point.
I was looking at the, again, this grizzly bear study. I think the CBC released it about, I think they called it endangered interior grizzly bears. Well, there's still a good number of grizzly bears, but it's how their habitat's been impacted and dissected because of the logging roads.
Yeah.
Right.
In the Granby area, right? So
Right.
just over the hill.
Yeah.
So I was looking at that, and again, you look and you start to pick up key bits of information and where it is, and basically what the habitat has just been shrunk by logging of the pine beetle. So it's not really the forest company's fault. The only thing I have trouble with is we should have been looking at deactivating those roads to reinstate that habitat once we've logged those areas. Keep your main roads in, but go about that. So the big message, I think, for us, coming back to all our other arguments and stuff is I think if we put the onus on everybody else is what footprint are you leaving in the world for wildlife? and see if we can generate the thought process around that.
Mm-hmm.
Because that, to me, is the biggest thing. Where we live, I build for a living. Where you guys live, it has an impact. We're a footprint. I always say I'm the biggest hypocrite because I'm a builder.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm okay. I'm building downtown Kelowna.
Well,
and I'm building 6 stories, so it's all good, right?
You pissed off some pigeon somewhere, or maybe you're helping them. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? I found a roost to place.
We're recording this place in a house that's built in Deer Winter Range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, and people have to realize, like, I don't know if people understand what Deer Winter Range is, but that is another education opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Is at least understand that your subdivision may be part of the problem.
Well, and this was something I think we touched on in that original recording is, you know, just because your hands aren't bloody or dirty, it doesn't mean that you aren't involved in some way with the killing of an animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a vegetarian, right? And the fields that are and the land that is being cleared to plant fields of kale or whatever else you're into, and I have no problem with vegetarians for the record. But you know, you're not guilt free, right? And if you sit in a condo in downtown Vancouver or downtown Victoria and you type away on your MacBook, you know, the gas that's feeding that apartment is coming from a spot that's wild that all of us have seen, right? And I've been on a mountain in northern BC and seen wellheads going off in the middle of the night when I should have been seeing nothing but fucking stars.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the modern world we live in. And I've got, you know, nothing against industry or resource extraction to a point, but to your point, Kelly, everything we do, everything we consume, everywhere we live has an impact on, you know, natural ecosystems and habitats. And yes, people can have a hard time seeing a human take the life of an animal.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not doing the same thing themselves, just unbeknownst to them in many ways, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a balance. And like, to go to the energy piece of it, you have like us in North America, if a baby's born very premature, we have the technology, the energy, the hospitals to deal with it, right? And we can save that life. If you go to Africa, they don't have the energy, the resources to save a life. So, I mean, there's that side, and we need a balance, and we need our energy and our technology. But then on the other side, I think it kind of goes back to that science-based legislation again, right?
Mm-hmm. And you know, like you mentioned that earlier, Kelly, and I didn't want to jump in on you because I feel so like I agree with you so strongly on that. And that, you know, that's part of why I got so up in arms about this decision, because it was so clearly and honestly not based on scientific wildlife management. I hate to bring up the podcast with Shane again, but he kind of, you know, cuffed me upside the head and was like, you know, Adam, you kind of need to grow up, because that's the new world order. And he brought up, you know, of course, we think, you know, we're living here in BC. This decision was made in BC. Oh, God, you know, well, they're attacking us here in BC. He brought up the seal hunt in Newfoundland.
Mm-hmm.
It was in place for 300 years.
Yeah.
100% sustainable, 100% positive impact on the local economy. And the morality of Europe shut that down. The moral compass of Europe shut that down.
Oh, look at the cod fishery.
Right? And so his point is, we are so quick to, you know, throw up the shield of scientific wildlife management, as I was, right, when I did that other podcast, you know. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say I didn't throw stones right back at them. And again, I'm not saying that was the right decision. It was just, obviously, it's a subject I'm super passionate about. But you know, we have to acknowledge the fact that we are playing in a landscape that is not. And I'm saying this as much to myself as anybody, that this is like, just, you know, the more I say it, the more I hope to remember it, is we're just not playing in a landscape anymore where that's the only argument we can have, right? As much as we believe in it, and as much as it's factual, and as much as it's true, and as much as it's the right argument, it's not the argument that, or the facts, you know, let's take it away from confrontation and just talk about, you know, discussion. It's not, those aren't the facts that are they're not as important as they once were in sort of the new world of how people respond to these things and research these things, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, especially given that it isn't legislated, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of in this no man's land where
Yeah.
public opinion's ruling and there's no real voice
Yeah.
putting any rationale
Yeah.
to
Right.
to
Yeah.
anything. So yeah, it's not a good place, I
Yeah.
don't think.
But I think, we can look at perspectives, and I always like to be anecdotal, and I guess in the sense that, I always like to compare stuff. If people don't get my point, is give them something that they can visualize. So, take the whole Fraser Valley. That was all Roosevelt Black Bear country.
Yep.
It's completely gone because of buildings, farming, whatever.
But hold on. People in Vancouver get their organic blueberries
Oh, yeah.
from the Fraser Valley.
Yeah.
I'm picking on people in Vancouver. That's not
But
fair.
You know what?
I lived there for 10 years. I think I reserve the right to do so.
But their impact, you know what? They're just as bloody as a hunter.
Yeah.
In my mind. And so I guess trying to explain that comment is they've still had an impact on wildlife, what populations can be in sustainable locations, as much as we as hunters are projected to have on those populations because of those loss of habitat.
Yep.
And again, there's some great success stories around the pit, the Harrison, and the reintroduction of Roosevelt elk in there. But that whole Fraser River Delta, I can just not imagine what the life would have been like in that ecosystem prior to the development down there. It would have been unbelievable.
Yeah.
Every time I flew back into Vancouver, that was the exact thought that went through my mind, because it would often take you down through the Fraser Valley, and just the, obviously it is what it is right now as far as developments and suburbs and farms, etc. But just sort of envisioning what that must have been like, whatever it was, hundreds of years ago, right?
Even 150 years ago.
150,
Right?
it would have been.
Mhm.
Yeah. A quick note on the people from Vancouver. I know we have a lot of listeners for sure on my podcast. I assume with your podcast that are, wonderful people, loyal hunters and anglers.
Yeah, those are Adam's thoughts, not ours.
What's the legalese? The opinions expressed in this podcast are the sole. So for those of you that are the loyal hunters and anglers from Vancouver, love you. But we all know that there's a contingent of the population there that falls into this disconnected category.
Yeah.
So, but I guess, again, talking to you guys from your podcast, those guys, the listeners in Vancouver, we're relying on you guys to change that messaging. You guys are going to be the first line of contact to change the messaging on presentation, those discussions, how you enter those discussions on Facebook, and those impacts. So those really, we're talking to you guys in Vancouver to start help change that perspective. And like I said, I'm not afraid to put myself out there. If we're going to Whistler to do a podcast, I'm in.
I love
I'm
the
all
idea.
over this.
You know what? We've got two fairly new hunters. We've got two experienced hunters in the room. We don't have two non-hunters.
That
in the
would
room.
be a great.
So I think maybe that's something we need to do. And maybe that's an excuse to go to Whistler.
Yeah.
Let's pack our bags and go for a trip then.
Revelstoke's closer. I'm sure we
That's
can
true.
find some non-hunters in Revelstoke. Maybe not. I've never been to Revelstoke.
They're starting to migrate there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to your point, Chris, like, I know I know for both of our audiences, like, we've been picking on BC, communities to an extent here, but this applies to Seattle. This applies to Denver. This applies to Portland. This applies to San Francisco. This applies
worldwide.
This is wherever you live. If you listen to this and you are, if you live in I'm not trying to pick on cities. I lived in them for a very long time. Not from them, but lived in them because of career for a very long time. But if you live in those sort of environments, odds are this is a more important topic than in smaller communities where that, connection to the land, for lack of a better way to put it, is just a little bit more pragmatic.
Yep.
Right. And we have to, and look, I'll be the first to say, like, when I moved to Vancouver, that was in 2006. And so I guess it wasn't 14 years ago, was it? But anyways, 10 years ago, before moving here, I I wasn't open about my hunting. I wasn't. I think, we
We're
talked about
the
this.
same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we talked about this.
Sort of
in
just
our
made that
first-
transition into being more vocal about it, but we hit it for a while. Yeah.
So, I'm not saying, or I don't think any of us are saying that we, are perfect in the way we've conducted ourselves, but, what's the political phrase? Don't never let a good crisis go to waste, right? This whole grizzly hunting ban, I think, has, lit a fire and woken a lot of us up to just how important it is for us to kind of take charge, right? And take the initiative and kind of stand up on the soapbox. And I don't mean that in the aggressive sense and throwing out the facts and stats that we have forever, but as you did, Kelly, that story you told today was like the best story I've heard in a long time about a hunter communicating with non-hunters. And of course, as you pointed out, Mike, social media is rife with issues. Just on that note, I want to pull something up that somebody posted that was somebody that I follow. They're an arrow manufacturer. I won't share their name, but the post was the 40 words anti-hunters can't argue without. And I will not repeat the words because CRTC would probably shut us down. But what does he say here? Bear with me. If you block these 40 words, the anti-hunting posts, and they make arrows, drop to near zero. From 40 posts plus a day to near zero. And these are basically all swear words, curse words, right? And hate-mongering type words, right? And we aren't, we, the hunting community, isn't any better in how we tend to respond. Maybe we don't respond in that way, per se. Murderer and baby killer and all the crazy stuff you hear people do or say online. But we are, and look, this is coming from a guy who responded very aggressively initially to this news. We're too quick to kind of take the fight right back to them instead of take a breath, think about it, and present, a measured response.
Yeah. And I may be wrong here, but I think a lot of those groups and people are a minority. And then hunters and anglers were a big group, but I think the group in the middle of those two groups is a huge group.
Oh, it's a massive group, yeah.
Right? So sometimes you hear of hunters saying, I know we've had some feedback where it's like, oh yeah, I listened to the Yuppie Hunter podcast, right? And it's like, well, whatever. Maybe we're not the old
about your guys' podcast.
Yeah,
the Yuppie Hunter. Yeah.
So it's like, well, maybe we aren't the old school hunters, and we might not take the approach of throw the deer on the hood of the car and celebrate it in downtown.
Can you guys get some t-shirts and hats made with that? Because I will wear that for sure.
We'll wear it around too. But I think that attitude is going to cause some problems, right? It's I do what I want. I don't care.
Yeah, great point.
And I'm going to whatever. I'll argue with anybody about it. It's my business. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
But the issue with that is there's a whole lot more of them, and they can take the rights of they can take your rights away. So I think people have to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Just going to say, I got to wrap it up pretty soon. One, I'm running out of time. Two, I'm going to piss my pants. So
you always have to go before we start.
There's a bunch of empty bottles kicking around here, Mike.
I don't know why I have to pee so bad, but if you guys are good, I think if we want to go around the room and sort of just do some closing thoughts on this, because I think we've done a pretty good job of summing this up. But
we were just getting warmed up here, man.
Yeah,
I think that's my closing thought right there, is just recognizing that there's a lot more of the non-hunting community, I think, and we just have to be respectful and try to educate them.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm just going to piggy right back to where you were on that, Kelly, and I've kind of paraphrased this, is we need to educate the 70%. So the 70% is the non-hunting public. The other 15% is the antis. The other 15% is the hunters. We need to educate that 70%. So if we want a t-shirt with a slogan on it, educate the 70%.
Right. Yuppie Hunter on the back.
With the Yuppie Hunter on the back. But just to take that one step further, just some numbers that I came across this week too. So between hunters and fishermen in within the province, there's, what is it now? I think it's 400,000 licenses are sold per year between fishers and hunters. I'll break it down to juice hunters only is about 125 to 130,000 hunters within the provinces on licenses sold in a year. So I'm trying to remember the population within the province. I think it's like 5 million. Is it? I can't remember what it is right now, but
Yeah.
you start to break those numbers. It kind of falls into where those percentages are.
It's 14.5 million collected through hunting license fees per year.
Money wise.
14.5 million.
Yeah. So from 125,000 hunting licenses.
Sorry, that's hunting and fishing, or just hunting?
This is just hunting
Wow.
licenses,
Yeah.
and 18, not to get into a whole other, but 18% of that goes into the Habitat Trust Fund. The rest goes into general revenue.
Yeah.
Check out the podcast with Jesse if you want to get into more. But
Which is a great one, for the record. It's just I listened to it so long ago that I don't remember the numbers.
it's good.
But you start doing numbers within the province, 400,000 people. That's a lot of voices for wildlife conservation stuff if we start to ban. My question is, and it's probably not to your guys' listeners, but where are those voices?
I agree.
BCWF, I think there are 35,000 members, hunters and anglers. Out of that, it's probably 15,000 hunters.
Yep.
They're missing 100,000 voices there.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's a
start-
great point.
start putting numbers in perspective. And this is where I'm going full circle now. I almost sound like but I'm not going to say that.
Well, easy.
But we're going full circle. Is if you bring fishermen back into the picture.
Mike, have you pissed your pants yet?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good.
My leg's twitching. I'm okay. I'll keep going.
But
There's a door right there.
maybe I
where
should
that
sneak
comes
out there.
in is how does hunters and anglers combine that, right? How do we bring those guys on board with us? And Jurassic Classic
Yeah, great
was
point.
that combination
Yeah,
of hunters and anglers getting together.
Mhm.
We need to be able to do that same thing again. 400,000 is a lot of votes.
Yep.
I would think any politician would take notice of 400,000 votes if they were directed in the right place.
Yeah.
Just putting that out there.
Well, and this wasn't going to be my final thought, and I promise, Mike, I'm going to be as quick as possible here.
I'll survive. I'm okay.
Not my forte. But, we talked about reaching across the aisle, right? And that Chris, you bring up a huge point. Like, that's the first group we should be reaching to across the aisle to, is the fishing community, right?
Yeah.
How many, I don't know how many different hunters I know that are fishermen or women or vice versa, right? And yet we're hearing crickets, from that community. And look, we didn't have a chance to, and it's probably well above our pay grade to get into the politics of how the various communities within the hunting community that have any sort of political will or voice haven't, as of yet, stepped up to say anything, right? But there's an issue there, without a doubt. But as far as like a parting thought, to your point, well, both your guys' point, Mike and Kelly, about our interactions with people, online and in particular through social media. Look, I get it. It's tough for those that, have been hunting for a long time, and I hear it all the time from people like, well, I don't really care what other people think. I'm posting these up for my friends and family to see, and I am who I am, and that's just how it is. I don't care, right? Let the aunties be the aunties. We're never going to convince them.
Yeah.
And that's true. We're probably never going to convince the aunties, right? But there is a new world order here, right? And we do need to, at minimum, provide context around the typical photography or images or film or whatever that we would put out there, right? So rather than just the grip and grin, show a bit of before, show the breaking down, show the cooking, right? Like Remy Warren is on Instagram, right? Has been on Instagram recently, but with his caribou hunt, right? And there's been maybe a handful of shots that are like, the antlers and the animal as a whole, and the rest are all packing and field dressing and cooking, right? And I mean, Remy does an absolutely phenomenal, I didn't mention him earlier, I was remiss in not doing so, does a phenomenal job in and showing the full story. And it's not a lot of work, right? He's just taking a few more pics,
Yep.
right? And providing a few more lines of text, if we're talking about Instagram. And that's, I guess what I'm trying to say here is for people listening, they're like, screw the antis and, screw the new way and, the yuppie hunters and the hipster hunters or whatever. Like I get it, like my neck is as red as anybody else out there. Like I grew up in the Canadian equivalent of fucking Texas. So like, I get it. But if you care about this topic, this pursuit, this lifestyle, and you care about that being passed on to another generation, we gotta step up. We gotta grow up, right? And adapt, right? It's not with great opportunity comes great responsibility, right? We have the opportunities here in BC in particular and across North America. And we can't expect the non-hunting public to understand what we do in the fullest sense, right? We have to handhold them through every single step. And if we do that, like you did, Kelly,
we'll make a difference.
We'll make a difference.
Yeah. 100% agree.
And just one quick comment. Sorry, Mike.
Both legs are going now. It was just one. It's now both legs.
But and you've alluded to it a couple of times tonight, Adam. Is the change between where Roosevelt and Aldo and Leopold and all those guys came from, and they were looking at a conservation mission to reestablish populations.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a different scope of that. We're trying to educate the non-hunting public about conservation to sustain conservation, because without us, there is no conservation.
Yeah.
So we as a group, as a Wild Sheep Society of BC, if we don't have sheep seasons, we're going to lose $400,000 or $500,000 a year that we put back on the ground for sheep conservation.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little hypocritical because we are hunters, but big picture is you're not going to replace that. The 70% is not going to replace that money. So you take our passion away, and that's, that sounds almost selfish that you're messing with a passion or outdoors thing, but I don't mean it to come across that way, but nobody else is going to replace that money.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to sound like it's too egotistical.
Regardless of the intent of the people that are,
yeah.
Like if your intent is in brackets trophy hunting or whatever, and whether or not you agree with that, and we probably shouldn't use that term anymore, as we were saying, but like the point is, it's money going back into conservation.
It's a net positive,
yeah,
absolutely. Well, and sorry, Mike, but I think I don't know, and I don't understand how we've not been able to kind of make this clear. This idea of us having like just wanting to wantonly kill everything that we see. Like if there's anybody or any group that doesn't want to see the end of, any species that is huntable, to put it in a selfish way, it's hunters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say earlier.
Right? Like we don't want there to be no more mule deer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe another way to put it is if I knew that, let's say this is pure, hypothetical, some freak event occurs, some sort of plague occurs, where past a certain date, all deer are sterile, and we knew that we were harvesting or killing from a finite resource. I don't know that I would hunt anymore.
No, I don't think I would either.
Yeah, I think most hunters wouldn't.
Right. And so like, I guess I struggle with, the non-hunting public not understanding, like they see our passion to some killing, to others, the pursuit. And yet they don't understand that if there's anybody that's invested in the sustainability and this is a big point in Shane's podcast, the enhancement of a given species, it's us.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think, was it you, Kelly, that brought this up in the lost audio files? It sounds like the X-Files. But Ranella talking about, people in Kentucky, right? So he uses this as an example to counter that argument. Well, people are just doing conservation because they want to kill them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I'm using some sort of redneck accent there, but point being that, Kentucky is a wonderful example of the reestablishment of historical elk habitat, right, and elk populations.
Yeah.
And the people that are responsible for that, by and large, are Kentuckians.
Yep.
And I don't know, I don't remember off the top of my head what the stats were, but very few of those people will ever get the opportunity to hunt those elk.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, and what I mentioned in the last episode was there's a YouTube video where Steve is talking to the public at, I think it was a book signing or something like that. But he was saying it's not that I don't care about the deer, specifically the individual deer. It's the species. Like the species is what I love.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just hard for people to separate that sometimes. But yeah, just conversations. I think that's key.
Yeah, no, there's no question. It's making, I think, a concerted effort to have tough conversations, right? And internally as well, right? Like talking amongst ourselves, like we did tonight, although most of us, I think, agree with a lot of what we were talking about. But, having, like, let's say you got a buddy who's like, screw it, I'm going to post this, bloody shot up with no other context. And, in a way, like, all the power to you. But, like, being willing to have that tough conversation with a friend to be like, you know what? Is that best for us? Right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And that, I'm not saying that's easy, right? But I'm saying that's the game we're playing.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the field of play. And we've not been playing the right game. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think social media has changed that evolution of what we put out there. So we've exposed ourselves somewhat to those questions.
Mm-hmm. If we were the 70%,
how would we perceive that?
If the hunters were the 70%, this wouldn't be an issue.
No.
We're not. So we have to respect what we're putting out there.
Yeah, huge point. Great point, Kelly.
Yeah.
Mike, it's your turn for parting thought.
I'm back. I relieved myself.
We got another hour, folks.
Yeah. We're good. Pour me another beer, Cal.
We're
He's
out.
smiling now.
No, I think...
Isn't there one more in the bag?
Is there?
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Oh, yeah.
There's also a bit left in
Fill her
this,
up, Cal.
this bad tattoo.
Here we go.
So we've been discussing this for well over 90 minutes, I think, which is an indicator that this is like a long form discussion. It's not
I told you.
a 2-sentence post or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's something that deserves the time and effort to describe and to bring it home for people who don't understand it. So I think this podcast that we've just done is evidence that it all comes from respect. And for people who don't know where we're coming from, if somebody's listening to this as a hunter and it resonates with you, I hope that they would be able to share this with somebody and that's not a hunter. And hopefully this conversation that we had resonates with a non-hunter as well and gives them a bit of insight into where we're coming from as hunters. And I think what we said earlier is this would be fun to do with 2 new hunters, 2 experienced guys, and 2 non-hunters. So maybe that's something we should do in the future because I think that'd be a pretty interesting conversation and a cool way to engage the non-hunting community. So
I think we started with the idea being that the crux of this issue is complexity, and I was wrong in suggesting that or agreeing with that. I don't remember who first brought it out, but engagement, Mike, like you just said, that's the key here, right?
Yeah.
And again, I said it a while back, but I'm going to say it again. I'm going to sound like a hypocrite when I say that because I, came out guns blazing as my initial reaction to this news that has precipitated this whole discussion. But there's no question that I can see that is the critical issue here. And I didn't do a good job of that, right? When I came out, I was trying to kind of, light the fire, wake people up a little bit, show them some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. But that was not an engaging, a positive example of engagement, right? And we need to do a better job of that, myself included, without a doubt.
yeah, I agree as a whole. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think you kind of summed it up. In the lost episodes is, I always say we got to quit sticking our heads in the sand. I think your analogy was better. We're going to have to put our dresses on and put ourselves out there.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. We've got to be able to engage. And it's exactly how you put it together there, Mike. I think that's what we have to do. And I think we have to talk, we have to have those conversations, how we go about doing that in a positive manner. Kelly did that today. How do you engage those groups? So we touched on it a couple of minutes ago, is the people in Vancouver, Victoria, they're listening to you guys' podcast, the US. These are the conversations you guys need to have. This is how we spread the word. Mm-hmm. We can spread the word. I was looking.
We're going on tour, folks.
Yeah.
We're going on tour.
I think we are.
I think one of the ways is you can start a podcast in your basement, and then people at work start questioning you about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because, like I say, we were joking about the field to table expression, but it's funny. I went out every time I kind of go out for dinner, and with all the great wineries around the Okanagan Valley, I went out for dinner last night, and I looked at the menu and I was looking to see what was on there, what was close to interpreted as wild game, and there was duck and bison on the menu.
Yep.
It's like, okay, well, people are already doing this. They just haven't acknowledged it, right? So, the concept is there. It's there for people to try. How can you not say that game meat is not the appropriate fare, that it's healthier for you? And you read all the stuff about what goes into our food, and it's not good.
No.
And even more ethical. Like, to say someone that wants to take the initiative and responsibility to get their own meat is less ethical than the person that goes to the grocery store. And there's been tons of podcasts and discussion around all this, and I think we're kind of talking a little bit to our own crowd here.
We're converted.
Preaching to the crier.
But even my wife, just a couple of days ago, she said it's not even when you compare like raised farm animals to wild game animals. Those animals are being raised in their environment for their entire life, which could be a horrible existence. Whereas a wild animal, she knows that when I go out there, that I've done enough preparation that in most cases, these animals are going to die within minutes. So if you consider their lifespan and their death just so small on the scale of their life, it doesn't even really compare to what some of these animals have gone through.
It's like that the end of Legends of the Fall. It was a good death.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's too crass a way to put it, but that is.
But I guess how would you like to go down? Would you like to be trapped and then
we're going here?
Yeah, or like sitting out in the wild and then in a matter of a few seconds you're down, kind of thing, right? So
yeah, no, there's no question. I mean, it's and let again, and you brought this point up, Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
This is something we commonly throw out in the hunting community, right? And I saw something come up on Instagram today. Guy, launched an arrow at an elk, not that far away. I don't know if it got much past the broadhead. The elk went down. Right, that was the next post. I can only assume it died from the arrow. Maybe not. We don't know, right? We don't have that context, right?
Yeah. See, it's going back to that whole. What are we using as an argument? And there might be holes in our arguments too, right?
But the point being that we have to be willing to acknowledge that, right, and have that conversation. And is that still a better death than getting taken down by wolves in the dead of winter? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Is it still a better death than the typical slaughterhouse concept? Yes. But, I think, coming to your point is coming back to the idea of that, we have to own our shit, right? Like we really do, and not be afraid to have the tough discussions internally and externally around the facts and all the facts, not just the facts we want people to hear and see, but all the facts.
All the facts.
Yeah. And because we know that, at the end of the day, if we go through every single fact we possibly can, the good and the bad about hunting, the good will far outweigh the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
I think coming back to your point there, Mike, and just I think maybe clear it up for people is the analogy between harvesting an animal and what, a domestic beef or chicken goes through
Yep.
caged up in there. And again, my analogy would be would be somebody that's maybe it's not a good analogy, but somebody that wants to take their own life, whether it be ALS or cancer or whatever, they have that choice. They want that quick succession. That they're done with the pain, right? And, that's whereby means a fair comparison to an animal. But when we want to harvest an animal, we want to harvest that animal quickly and not have it suffer.
Yep, 100%.
And that's the equation I'm trying to make is a suffering component.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't want to digress off too far and make
No,
people that take that the wrong way.
No, it's a good point though, right? Is because that's probably one of the most consistent things you hear when we talk about emotions, right? We talk about ethics, and whether it's an outright loss of an animal, because that happens, right? Like,
Yep.
Let's be all open and honest. It happens.
Yep.
We do everything possible to avoid that, but it happens. So whether it's a loss or a less than ideal shot, that affects a hunter in a way that is almost impossible to put into words, right? And that's hard to communicate to a non-hunter, because it's we're asking kind of for sympathy for going down a path that most people can't even agree with from the outset, right?
Yeah.
But it is to your point, Chris, it speaks to the seriousness with which we take that responsibility of making that choice, right?
Yeah.
To loose the air or pull the trigger.
Yeah. And what it means to be consuming animals for food, right?
Yeah.
Like it just puts it all in perspective.
You know what? While we're on this topic, then we can wrap it up if we want to here. But Cooper's Foods did a cool thing with their eggs where basically they had a description of how each type of egg was kept, or the chickens were handled.
Mm-hmm.
So the cheap eggs were kept in cages, and that's what it says on the tag. These animals were kept in cages for the duration of their life. Cage-free animals were given a certain amount of time per day to wander within like a confined space.
Yeah.
Range-free animals were basically free to wander wherever they want, and so on from there as you kind of get into a higher quality and better quality of life for these animals too. So while you're sitting there looking at these eggs, you're not just looking at the price, you're looking at how these animals were treated throughout their life.
I've seen that at Save On too.
Yeah, and which I think is a very cool thing, and I think that's something that should be translated to meat products as well. So if you had a photo of a happy cow in a nice, beautiful green pasture, then you probably feel good about buying that piece of meat if that was the photo that was on top of it. And then if you had next to that, package of steaks was a photo of a cow in some horrible cage, it might put things into perspective a little bit more for you. Yeah, that caged up animal is going to be much cheaper, but now you're actually putting a visual to what that animal's existence was like, which was horrible compared to the one next to it, who probably had a great life and was slaughtered humanely. And I think that's the same thing as what we're doing as hunters. Is when we eat that animal, we can picture exactly where it lived and how it was harvested, and that's what's important to us, and that's why it's such a heavy experience, right? So
the picture's key, because most of the hunts you go on, those memories, those mountains, and I think that's what keeps us coming back. And especially as you get into a mountain hunter, the more you get into that mountain hunting and the landscapes, I always joke with people, I've been to Banff and it's so beautiful and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, and you kind of alluded this to a little bit about where you've been in BC. And we used to do horse trips in the mountains I did them for 20 years. So I was spoiled. We were riding around mountains where, other people have been there, but we never saw the other people out there. We were hunting. We were in the bush for 2 weeks, right? And we're just riding through the mountains.
So just on that point, when I referenced the, sitting on a mountaintop and seeing an effing wellhead, So that was looking one direction. You look the other direction. And like, I hate to admit this, but I had to stop glassing for sheep because the mountains and the rock formations looked like they were from a different planet.
Yeah.
And the point being that if that was next to a major highway, if that was down, sort of south of, the mid latitudes of BC or Alberta, it would be the biggest tourist trap ever.
Yeah.
Right. And my buddy that was with me and we took all these pictures, and like I go back and look at it, and it literally looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. This circular, it looked like somebody had taken a giant ice auger to the side of the mountain. And I wish I had a picture I could show you guys, because it is like I was glassing and I saw this and I'm like, am I losing it? Like, I didn't believe what I was seeing, right? And it was like literally like I was speechless, right? And it was a wonderful hunt and it was an amazing experience. And I made some mistakes and I didn't get a ram. I had an opportunity, didn't get it done. And yeah, I think about that missed opportunity on that ram that I think was legal, but didn't get close enough to get a real good look at him, because I blew him by making a stupid aggressive move. But that's not what I'm going to remember when I'm 70 years old.
Well, that's what it's just.
Right.
I think we alluded this into the last episode, was what do we remember from a hunt? Usually, it's not the harvest. There's something that's gone on, and I noticed that when people are telling stories, it's not the harvest of that animal. Something happened on a hunt, and that's the component that you remember.
Yep.
We as hunters put pressure on other hunters by saying, "Was it a successful trip? Did you harvest something?"
Huge point. Yeah.
When it's not the case, it's exactly what you're talking about there, Adam. It's that point that's vivid in your memory. Yeah, there was a sheep there, and that part's gone, but it's that visual. One story, I don't know if I think I told you guys this story before about the buffalo or not. I'm not sure. We were riding across the top of. We were hunting in the halfway, and we rode up these trails, and we got on this ridge, and there was three of us, and we're all on horseback, and we're riding across kind of just like a plateau, but it dropped off on either sides, and there was a little lake off to the right. We were riding along, and a buffalo popped out here, and a buffalo popped out here, and a buffalo, and before you know it, there's like, I don't know, 15 buffalo in front of us, but they were kind of going this way. And it was funny because we didn't say a word to each other, and we just I looked at Doug, and I looked at Rod, and he looked, and we all looked at each other, and we just kicked our horses, and we weren't gonna harass them. We just galloped towards the buffalo, and as these buffaloes started to run, the whole bush just came to life.
Wow.
By the time we were done, there was probably 200 head of buffalo.
Wow.
Jesus.
Just kind of, and it was just like the movies, right? So
That's like time travel.
It's exactly what it was like.
Yeah.
I was riding along, and we're in our cowboy hats riding the horses, and here's these buffalo, and they just kind of went up in front, and there's like just this herd, and then they just dove off the mountain and down in the valley. And it was just surreal, right? You know what? I'm trying to remember what trip it was. I know we harvested some animals, but I couldn't tell you what we harvested. I remember the buffalo.
No, exactly, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well,
so alluding to what you were saying,
Yeah.
Mike, about the messaging and
For sure.
the memories.
And I think that's some beautiful imagery to end this one off. Yeah. Unless you guys have anything else
Well,
to add.
No,
we could probably keep talking.
We
but-
started our parting shots like 15 minutes
Yeah.
ago, I think, right?
I don't think we can beat this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
No.
I certainly can't beat that story. Unless you hopped off the horse and started to ride a buffalo, that would beat that story.
I have other stories.
We'll save that for next time.
Part 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Chris's book is coming up on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
I better start writing it somewhere. I got a good. When I harvest a goat, I got to write a book.
We'll just, all we have to do, this will be the last bit, is so nowadays, Chris, all you have to do is like talk into a microphone, tell your stories, and there's companies that turn that into a book for you. They edit it, they produce it, they do a cover, they do everything for you.
That's so simple.
It's so simple.
Oh, I have to visit my notes. Yeah, it comes back to your pictures, right? Your pictures that you have in the book, and you look at those pictures. It may be the harvest or whatever it is, but anyways,
For sure.
I'll let you close it out, Mike.
Cool. Well, if you're a Rookie Hunter fan and this is your first time listening to Beyond the Kill, then make sure you subscribe to Adam's podcast. And if it's the first time hearing us as Rookie Hunter, we've been on Adam's show before, but welcome, and hopefully you'll check us out as well. So this is fun doing the old SWAPCAST, and as shitty as it was that the last episode is lost forever, it gave us an excuse to get together again, and I think we've recorded a great episode today and got to consume some more alcoholic beverages and had a good time. So
Responsibly, of course.
responsibly, yes.
No, I think we stepped it up from last time.
I think so too.
I do. I really
That's
do.
usually what happens the second
Yeah.
time.
We have a little bit of time to ruminate and germinate, and,
For sure.
and get more information, right? I mean, that's.
Yeah.
I mean, if we take it back to the original, let's say, impetus for this discussion, it's a fluid situation, right? And yeah, to the listeners of the Beyond the Kill podcast, if you aren't subscribed to the Rookie Hunter podcast, please do. Mike and Kelly do an incredible job covering some awesome topics, and I couldn't vouch more strongly for what those guys have going on. So thanks, guys, for the time. It's always a good time. It's great. It's great.
Thank you, guys.
It's great that we're all here, right, in the same place.
And tomorrow, September 1st.
That is a great way to end it.
Yeah.
And I'm heading off archery hunting.
So am I. Yeah.
Son of a gun.
All right. Cool.
Awesome. Thanks,
cool.
guys.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.